In that case, I'll give you $600, $700, $800 not to take the curtain. $900, $1,000.
I need the money, but I want the car.
I need the money, but I want the car. I need the money, but I want the car. Scans beautifully. $1,100.
Oh, don't do this to me.
$1,200.
I want the car.
$1,300. $1,400. $1,500.
Monty Hall, thank you so much for being here.
What a pleasure.
You are 91 years old. Just to start out, how do you keep this fountain of youth?
Well, first of all, I think the secret is you lie about your age. See, you tell everybody that you're 71, then you try to live up to the lie. I'm trying to live up to the lie.
Maybe you should tell them you're 51, see if you can get by that.
If I get by, I'll try 51.
You began your career as a sportscaster.
I was an actor first. I was an actor, and then I sang. I had singing programs, so I'm acting and I'm singing. I'm ready, and I'm doing sportscasting. But I couldn't get the major sports. When I came to New York, I managed to get. I was the color man for the New York Rangers. I did wrestling at Sunnyside Gardens. I did international soccer from the Polo Grounds. I couldn't get the major sports, but I loved it. I loved sportscasting more than anything, and I would have stayed with sportscasting when I got this call to do this show, Video Village, which brought me out to the West Coast, and I stayed with the game shows after that.
Let's talk, let's make a deal. The game show of game shows, the standard bearer. How did it all begin?
When I came out to the West Coast with this Video Village show, I created a show called First Impressions. It was a sort of a psychological game show. And since I was working at CBS, I couldn't produce the show on NBC that we sold, so I hired a fellow named Steve Hados, and he and I became partners. And on those occasions when he and I were not working on our shows, we'd have lunch and start creating other ideas. And I told him about a show I had done in Canada, where I went into the audience and did the whole show from the audience. He liked that idea. He always wanted to do a show based on The Lady and the Tiger, or the old parable about two tents, and the Sultan says to the man that he captured, you pick the right tent, you win the lady, or you pick the wrong tent, you get the tiger. And so we made that into 3 doors. Instead of 2 tents, we made it into 3 doors, and working in the audience. And we thought we had something different. Now, how do you sell it? It was so different. So we called clubs and organizations and we said, can we be your entertainment? When your meeting is over, would you let us do a half-hour show and show you? And they said, fine. And we'd take little envelopes that said refrigerator or whatever the prize was, and a rubber chicken, which was the zonk. And we'd do the show for these clubs, and we got a terrific reaction. So we knew we were onto something. So we did a full-scale run-through for 2 networks. There were only 3 networks in those days, and 1 didn't take game shows. So we put on the run-through for these 2 networks with tremendous reaction, and neither one of them bought it. To my surprise and amazement, I remember going into the green room after one of the run-throughs, and the network person says, yeah, it was great that's great for one day. What do you do the second day? And what do you do the second day? More of the same. You know, I tried to convince these people. He wouldn't buy it. The next network didn't want to buy it, but there was one person at the second network at NBC who said to his boss, I believe in this show. You've got to let me make a pilot. So in April of 1963, we made a pilot, and it was wonderful. And we heard nothing. May, June, July, August, September, not a word. In October, we got a call from the network and said, listen, we have a time period where no show has made it now. We're 13 weeks and canceled, 13 weeks and canceled. If you want that time period, you can have it. But I'll tell you, it's not a very successful time period. We took it. And we were a hit.
You sure were. It's interesting because really the premise of the show was not even a game show. It was more of a gambling show.
Yes, of course it's a gambling show, because no matter what you had a choice to then improve on it or lose everything you got. So the question was, you won the television set. Do you want to trade in for what's behind one of the 3 doors? There could be something great back there. as many times. There could be a car or a trip, or there could be a zonk, it could be 3 horses, anything. But you were risking, every time you did something, you were risking something. And I think that the aspect of the gambling not only was good for the contestants, but the people at home, because that involved the people at home, the viewer. Once the viewer's involved, you got a hit. And the viewer would say, don't do it, or go for it, go for it. They were yelling at the television set. And also saying, if I were there, I would have done this. And when you get a person doing that, they become involved with the show. They're just not a spectator.
As I kind of remember it, you were not a big hit with the critics. In fact, the critics really didn't like you, yet your show was adored by the public. That was sort of an oxymoron.
Yeah, it is. Well, of course, the critics called it a genre of greed shows and so on. And be that as it may, nobody loved me except the public. And interestingly enough, the big stars in Hollywood used to stop me all the time. Jimmy Stewart knocked on my dressing room door once when he was at NBC, and he told me that he and his wife watched the show every day. And I did a thing with John Wayne. Joan Crawford in Las Vegas came running up to my dressing room several flights up to tell me how much she loved the show. I walked into a studio when Jimmy Durante was doing his show, and he saw me, and he ran up the stairs and he put his arms around me. I loved that, because these are the stars that I adored, and that they were big stars. They loved the show. They weren't like the critics who were always knocking something. They understood what I was doing. They loved my performance, and that's what I loved.
You know what I found interesting? You had a motley crew of audience members on the program, but it was sort of the melting pot. Black folk, white folk, Asian folk, Jewish folk, Middle Eastern folk. Back then, that was sort of precedent setting, wasn't it?
And not only that, but we were the first show that did that. Up to then, all the contestants in all the game shows were young, pretty people. But we introduced everything. Fat people and skinny people and older people, as well as younger people. Because I remember we sat and talked to our people. When you put the people in the audience for me to play with, make sure it's a cross-section of America. I want to see just a cross-section of America so that I can go and pick anybody. I don't care who they are, but it's America.
And did you decide who got picked from the audience?
No, it made no difference to me. I just go down and pick you. I can pick. You see, anybody makes a good contestant. Anybody.
Well, how did the whole costume thing start? Because I remember everybody wore these gag costumes.
When we did the first show, people were dressed like you, like a nice shirt and tie like you have on, or a sweater. That's the way people dressed for shows those days. But when I was picking people at random, the second week, a woman came to the show and she held up a sign. And I read the sign and said, "Roses are red, violets are blue. I came here to deal with you." Oh, that's kind of cute. So I'm talking to her and I picked her as a contestant. Well, when I did that, the next week everybody came with a sign. And then it came the funny hats and the funny costumes. And I remember the network called us in and they said, "Listen, there are 500 people waiting to get into your show down there. And it looks like Halloween. They're all dressed in all these. What are you going to do about that?" And I said, "Nothing. Because this is television. This adds a colorful flair to it. It's pictorial."
You were good friends with the great Jack Benny, who was not only a friend of yours, but a great fan of yours. Talk about that.
Jack Benny taught me, well, I already knew it, but he confirmed what I had suspected. We're having lunch one day and he said, on your show, Jack Benny, he said, on your show, you never take a close-up and you own the show. I said, "That's right. You don't need a close-up of me because the close-up is on the contestant. When that box is lifted up or when that door opens, I want that full screen image of that woman reacting to what's back there, either in great joy or, sadness about what she picked. Because the whole show is on the reaction of the people. Prizes are there, shows are there, elements are there, but it's the reaction.
Do you miss the celebrity fame? I mean, you were the King of Kings back in the day. You were the game show host. I'm sure you couldn't go anywhere without someone stopping you.
Well, the thing I liked about it is that when people see me on the street and they would say, "I watch your show all the time and I love it," I enjoyed it when they said, "I enjoy your charity work, what you've done to raising money." I enjoyed that a little even more. But from a celebrity point of view, I came home at night. I wasn't a celebrity. I was daddy. I was the husband. we didn't carry the celebrity too far.
You talked about your beloved Marilyn, your wife of 65 years. What is the secret to the success of a marriage of 65 years?
Well, there are all kind of jokes about the, two words. The secret is yes, dear. No, I think the secret, given that you have fallen in love with a woman and she with you, then after that, there's a give and take throughout life. She has the opportunity when I'm down and if something's wrong to come reach right out and help me. A great sense of humor on both sides, and you work at it. And if the bottom line is, if the love is there, it'll be there forever.
You, as many people might not know, have been involved in tremendous charitable contributions your entire life.
I've been involved in all kinds of charities. And I had a tennis tournament that ran for, about 25, 30 years here in Los Angeles for diabetes. And we've raised a considerable amount of money. And I've been involved in all kinds of charities. It's part of my life and very satisfying.
I read somewhere, correct me if I'm wrong, that you raised in your lifetime about $1 billion to those in need.
My secretary used to keep tab of all the events. I did 55 telethons, for example, and all the banquets and everything that I did, and she would keep a running score. And about 3 years ago, she said, you passed the $1 billion mark. That's a billion with a B. You going to stop now? I said, no, I'm not going to stop now. Just keep going because it's so satisfying, especially when you're doing things for children.
Monty Hall, thank you very much for a wonderful interview.
My pleasure.